Hi, my name is Delaney Schlesinger-Devlin, and today I'll be interviewing Scott Sanders.
Hey, I'm Scott Sanders. I'm the Antioch College Archivist, officially and unofficially the Antioch College Historian.
Perfect. So why did you want to be an archivist and a historian, or either of them?
I'll answer the second one first. I've been interested in history since I was at least 10, 12 years old. So I always knew I wanted to do it as a profession. What I had to get past were all the people who told me that I couldn't, find a job doing. When I was in college, I was majoring in history and I was planning on going the full measure and getting a PhD and, trying to find a history teaching job at a college or a university. But I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to write a dissertation because that's like a whole book. And I also realized when I was an undergrad that there weren't too many jobs in the field, but there were a lot of out-of-work historians. How much of a contribution can I make if all I'm doing is turning out more people who can't find jobs? So as I was getting ready to graduate from Wright State University, I found out that Wright State had a master's program in what they call public history, which prepares you to work in an archive or a museum. I could be out of school in 2 years, and that there were more jobs in the field, and that this was a much more employable profession, and that was also going to make my mother-in-law happy because she was not thinking that I could ever support her daughter with, and that her daughter was going to be stuck supporting me for X number of more years while I screwed around on my dissertation. So it was I'd say that both of them found me, both historian and archivist.
You go to school, you start becoming like a public historian, an archivist, but then how in the world did you end up here at Antioch?
That's a great question. So the graduate program includes a 300-hour practical internship in a historical institution. My nominal faculty advisor was a woman named Dorothy Smith, who was an archivist at Wright State and a Yellow Springs resident. And what I really thought I wanted to do was my internship at what I'll describe as a sexy place, the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Colonial Williamsburg. And the place that I picked out is called Mystic Seaport. It's in Connecticut, a place I visited when I was a kid. It's one of the things that turned me on to history when I was young. And it's old fishing and seafaring, interpretive living history place. So I contacted them and I found out that, yes, I could intern there. I would get paid nothing and have to live in a dormitory.
Oh, that's not fun.
No. And I was a year into my marriage, year and a half. And I just didn't want to leave my wife to go and, sleep in a room with a bunch of other grad students. So I went back to Dorothy and I mentioned how this just wasn't going to work out and what else could we do and could we find something that I could get paid. And Dorothy said, well, there's this thing at Antioch.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right. So that was $10 an hour, big money back in the mid-90s.
Oh my God, yeah.
And at least for a grad student or any student. And and Dorothy knew about it because she was on the Archives Advisory Committee. So I came out here and I got interviewed. And because I got raised right, I came out here in a coat and a tie for my job interview. And it was May and almost summer, and session was out here. So the place was kind of deserted. I walked in the front door. I saw this guy in a tie-dye T-shirt who was Duffy.
Ah, you met Duffy?
He's the first Antioch person that I saw.
That's wild.
And before I could tell him who I was and that I was here for an interview, I was intercepted by a woman named Nina Myatt, who was the curator of Antiochiana. And she, shook my hand and said, "You must be Scott because you don't look like any of us."
That's a good introduction. That's a great introduction.
And so I got the job. There was really no not getting the job. What I didn't realize was when I was just here for practical experience to get my master's degree, Nina was looking for a successor. She was class of 53. So even in the 90s, she was, not young. She'd been doing this job almost 25 years, more than 25 years. And the part that I've never figured out is why she picked me over 5 or 6 other interns that she had, in succession over the years. But when the 300 hours were over, she, wanted me to hang around, and we got grants to get me paid. And when we couldn't get hired in a conventional way through the college, it's the one thing I can thank Antioch University for. They, thanks to old faculty member who was very supportive of Antiochiana and my work, he arranged for my appointment as the first full-time archivist for Antioch University.
Oh, I see.
So I was called the Antioch University Archivist, but I worked in this area, and 90+% of my work was college related. It was really just an administrative workaround.
To get you paid and get the job.
And make people find out that maybe I'm pretty useful around here.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I'm still doing my internship, by the way.
How many hours are you at?
Let's see, 28 years, thousands.
What are your favorite sort of like topics to like either research or to like get stuff from alumni on, or the things that you just like, I know everything about this because it's so cool?
There are so many things that I had no idea I would learn, and that's because of what's here and the people that I've helped find it. General interests of mine that dovetail nicely in with the collection were, believe it or not, sports. So
This school doesn't have any sports team since, what, 1926?
1928, we played our last football game, and we haven't played any baseball or basketball since the 1930s. But we had a rich intercollegiate athletic history that is also was a big chunk of student life at that time. It's not recognizable to in comparing it to other colleges, I don't think, but the star quarterbacks were the most popular kids on campus, and I like punching holes in myths.
I thought you were going to say people, and I
No,
was
I
a little...
don't like punching people.
Okay.
It's not my way. But I like punching holes in myths, and one myth that has been around the Antioch for over 100 years is that Antioch College beat Ohio State in football. And it seems absurd, right? But alumni really liked it, so they ran with it. I found when it was first printed, and then I found, thanks to a researcher who was writing a book on, he was compiling the score of every college football game ever played in American history, which that book's like that thick.
Yeah,
right?
really. That's not a book.
No. And it was one of the interesting things that happens when I run into a researcher like that. They often know our sources better than we do. So when we were like, well, we don't know whether we played such and such and when. And he's like, oh, well, it's going to be in your alumni magazine, and it's going to be in November. And he was right. And so it was there that I learned that in 1894, yes, Antioch College played Ohio State and we lost.
Oh, dang.
Winning and losing is not material. I know more about the Nobel Peace Prize than I should because of my work here.
Wait, why?
Because that old faculty member that made sure I got employed here was the world's leading authority on the Nobel Peace Prize, at least its history. And so in 2000, I helped him edit his illustrated biographical history of the Peace Prize. My mother-in-law, the one who wanted me to, get out of school fast so I could support her daughter, at some point became enamored of her Norwegian heritage. And so she and my wife went to a international festival in Middletown, Ohio, of all places, where the subject that year was Norway. And so my friend Erwin, who was the faculty member on the Peace Prize, he gave a presentation there. And the other person that was there of note was Anne Cecile Schelling, who is the librarian at the Norwegian Nobel Institute in Norway.
Okay.
And we had already worked on Erwin's book. So when my mother-in-law, so enamored of this program, went up and spoke to the librarian afterward, somehow my name came up, and Anne talked about how great I was. And after that, I never had to justify anything to my mother-in-law.
What is social justice to you, and how do you think Antioch is as a social justice institution, historically, currently, however you think?
I think that this office is involved in social justice just by simply being open and available and not having anything inside of it that people can't see. So archives have a role to play. and that's as far as the role as I want to go. It is especially illustrative when Antioch College was closed, and there were people desirous of knowing why and all kinds of other information. And I ended up releasing to the people who ultimately purchased the school what was known as the Antioch Papers, which were supposed to have been confidential files, at the top levels of Antioch University administration that foolishly, sent over to my department, not realizing that this was a place that was open for use. I got a lot of trouble for that.
Would you say that historically Antioch has been an institution that is trying to be forward-thinking, progressive, social justice oriented?
From its very inception. So it originally created as a co-educational school. So for just the belief that men and women could, have access to the same higher education in the same way was groundbreaking, and I usually use the term scandalous at the time. The fact that it was a non-sectarian institution, which meant that it didn't teach its peculiar brand of Christianity, really put it out, far ahead of other small Protestant schools that are just like us, except for that part. The college has been a place to experiment with things that haven't been tried before, like participatory governance with students and faculty and administration, absolutely as a teaching tool, but also in a trusting people that don't necessarily have the kind of experience that you'd want to see in someone governing an entire college campus. It's the money where your mouth is kind of a teaching. College leadership wasn't 100% down with this idea, but they supported this idea, and they attempted to control it. So, for instance, when students wanted to picket the barber downtown that wouldn't cut a black man's hair, the Gegner Barbershop affair, long 12, 14-year process. Initially, at least, if you were to protest downtown, you had to let your parents know that you were doing it. You had to pledge yourself to, conventional dress. You're supposed to shave. And so, there was this thing where they were absolutely not at all sure that they wanted to let students do this, yet they did. And then you build on that from there to the point where, half the student body would go to D.C. to protest, for instance, nukes in the 1980s, or attend national pro-choice rallies. It's how our students ended up on the front page of magazines when the G8 meetings in Seattle, which were broken up by violent police. Colleges and universities are inherently conservative places. But like in the mid-1960s, when the student body and much of the faculty wanted Antioch College to take a position on the war in Vietnam, there was an enormous seminar that went over the course of 2 whole terms, with notes taken and reports made, and the ultimate conclusion was that institutions don't take stands, people do. But still, to go through the entire exercise was, broadly educational for people. I think people learned a lot about the country of Vietnam and the state of American foreign policy at the time. We had a ship in World War II named after us called the SS Antioch Victory.
That is quite funny. That's given the...
It's not. It's worse than you think. The SS Antioch Victory broke in half and sank eventually.
Sounds about right.
Which I always said sounds about right. So great. They're great minds thinking alike again.
Going against the grain, doing everything to... Sounds about right.
We had a yo-yo tournament against Ohio State once, and we lost the tournament, but we won all the creative points.
Of course we did.
Of course we did.
What can people do if they want to either learn more about the school, learn more about the archives here, or even just come and they have a random question? What can they do?
Well, you can find me. That's a good one. you can call, you can come in now, but post-pandemic, we didn't used to let people do that. I get quite a lot of questions just on my email. And I'm pretty much here every day, so that's a good way to do it. If you just have a random question, if you have more of a general interest, I'll take appointments. People can stay in here and read as long as we're open, which is 9 to 5 weekdays. And as a staff benefit, they call it History Hour with Scott, Antioch History Hour with Scott. So I have a hard time containing my comments to an hour, but I have about
We know this. Don't worry. We know this, Scott.
I have about 12 or 15 canned lectures that I've given over the years. So those are a couple of different ways that you can do that. There's also some books to read if people want to read. But there still is not the big history of Antioch College.
You have to write that one, I think.
That's what they keep telling me. I would really prefer not to. Now we're back at my dissertation.
We'll give that to your predecessor. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to discuss or touch on before we finish up?
We talked about a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
I wasn't ready for that one.
It's a good 1-2 punch at the end.
Right?
Because next I'll go, thank you so much.